The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara. I'm Sara Paya, your host, and today I have Jesce Horton from LOWD. Jesce is a visionary leader, chief executive officer at LOWD, which is an award-winning cannabis company that embodies the art of urban craft cultivation. Jesce, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Sara. Very happy to be here. I appreciate it.
So you're up in Portland, right?
That's right. Good old Portland, Pacific Northwest.
I love Portland. It's such a beautiful place. I'm actually in Oakland, but we go to Portland a lot because we have a lot of friends there. Well, you know, a lot of us Californians like to go there, but I promise I won't stay if I go there. Far too many of us coming up there and messing with the real estate. I wanted to start out, like I often do, with asking you what your first experience with cannabis was like.
Sure. Well, you know, I started consuming cannabis when I was in high school. So I think it was pretty typical of most high school. It's kind of after school. First time you consume, you don't really get high. Try it one more time, and then it's kind of like off to the moon. So I actually was, you know, not a really good math student at the time. Was not a good student for the most part, but especially math. And then I think maybe I had some form of ADHD, and I just couldn't settle down for long enough to figure things out. So around the time when I started consuming cannabis, a lot of that changed. And, you know, instead of me going out and hanging out with friends, sometimes I would just sit at home and do homework. And, you know, that was kind of a transitional period for me, not just experiencing cannabis, but also kind of becoming a better student as a result, and then seeing more opportunities after that.
That's really interesting because it's something we talk about a little bit, you know, especially in the advocacy area, but I don't know that we have as many conversations out in the open about the fact that for a lot of us, cannabis really helps with creating, you know, concentration. Because I have a little bit of ADD myself, and I don't know if you can call it a little bit, but I found,
Right.
you know, I use these days I've been using a tincture that's equal parts CBD and CBG that really helps me get rid of, like, you know, the Monday scaries where I'm sitting here at my desk going, okay, where do I start with this week? Because I have so much going on. It's really amazing how much that can really help create balance for us, and just how much neurodiversity comes into play with how we respond to cannabis.
Yeah, it's crazy. You start learning more about the endocannabinoid system and learning about the different strains and the different compounds, you know, how you can utilize that to improve your quality of life in a number of different ways. It's kind of a light bulb moment for a lot of us stoners, and just the idea that, you know, there's a lot of functional good to cannabis outside of just, you know, the euphoric effects.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, when I was reading your bio, I saw that you're an engineer.
That's right. I was really able to utilize that math boost and kind of find my home because, you know, I actually ended up being a really good math student, and engineering was a really great kind of next step for me to do more, you know, applied mathematics and understanding how that math can really help me to build things, you know, in a lot of different ways. So that was a fun transition, and I had a good time getting that degree in school.
That's very cool. And when did you decide to make the transition to working in cannabis, and how did you choose your area in cannabis?
Yeah, so actually I was over in Munich, Germany for about a year and a half. And I was at Siemens headquarters. I was at a German engineering firm. got a chance to go overseas to their headquarters. And when I got the offer to come back to the U.S., they told me I can go to Portland or to New York for a number of reasons. I was getting kind of tired of the corporate aspect of things, and Portland was, anything other than corporate. So I decided to jump in and come to Portland. I ended up not really enjoying my job because I was doing sales and it just wasn't my forte. But I actually also started growing cannabis in my basement, and that's kind of my first entry into the industry, was just kind of growing in my basement to my garage, and then really expanding in cultivation from there.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And when did LOWD start? When did you get the vision to be able to make that happen?
Yeah, at first I wanted to have a dispensary, and then wasn't able to find a location, so I decided to go a little deeper into cultivation. And around 2017, as things were moving to the recreational, or kind of, the recreational market was growing, becoming more of a thing here in Oregon, I decided to move from medical cannabis growing to recreational. And in doing that, really just wanted to find not only a way to add value to the market, through flowers and craft cultivation, but a way to I guess add value to what I was doing on a daily basis. And as I got into it, retail just wasn't the best for me. So we decided to expand from medical to recreational, and then build a brand that was really just focused on who we were, Pacific Northwestern people. I've only been there for about 10 years, but very much identify with the way of life, the cannabis culture, and decided to build a brand around that. LOWD is kind of our connection to what we, coined as kind of some of the best cannabis, really loud attributes, great smell, great effects, and utilize a number of other things that we feel like really are a piece of the cannabis culture, right? That sometimes seems a little taboo nowadays. Wrapped all that up into a brand called LOWD, and launched it in 2020. Actually, we're coming up on a year pretty soon.
Wow. Yeah, and for coming up on a year and being in Oregon, you've done a lot with your brand, because a lot of people outside of Oregon actually know who you are, which is it's pretty amazing, because there's there are MSOs where people see their presence in every state, but normally when we're looking at, especially like state companies that are in certain states, they may be well known in the state that they're housed in, but maybe not as much outside of the state. And you've really kind of changed that, because I think most people who are looking at the cannabis scene from like a larger standpoint see you. And it's just what you've done. I mean, I was looking at the website and everything. You've just done a lot. Well, and in addition to doing your cultivation, you've just done a lot to change how cannabis is done and how we look at it. Because what year did you co-found the Minority Cannabis Business Association?
Yeah, well, that's good to hear, because, sometimes I have my head down and I'm not really focused on what anybody's talking about, just trying to focus on the work and getting things accomplished. And I think the brand has done very well. I think mainly because, we connect with a lot of the stoners, the people who feel maybe a little bit left behind in the evolution of the cannabis industry. And I think the brand also has benefited from a lot of my nonprofit work. We started MCBA in 2014, actually, a couple years after I started growing in my basement, with some really dope people from across the nation, and got a lot of really cool things done. So a lot of people know me for the advocacy work, as well as cultivation and industry work.
Yeah, I think it's super important for people to have a seat at the table to talk about how the cannabis industry should look and how it should be run, and making sure that everybody who should be included is included. I remember.
Yeah, I think we.
Oh no, what were you
I'm
going to say?
sorry.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. No, no,
I was
no.
just. I think. I think we have a real big opportunity to build a really dope industry. So it's important that we're very thoughtful every chance we can.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. I was one of the co-chairs for the San Francisco Legalization Task Force for 3 years, and now I'm on the oversight committee for San Francisco. Though I don't do work with leadership anymore. It's a lot. It's an honor to do the work, but it's also there's a lot of work to do. And I think that we have a unique opportunity to change the way that business is done even outside of cannabis with the models that we can create within the cannabis industry around, you know, equity, really, and even though we're not seeing as much of a leveling of the playing field right now because there's a lot of stuff to sort out, I think that if we continue the work, we can do that, create greater accessibility. And also, like when we're looking at other states that aren't allowing people to grow at home, I think we can change that too. It's all about educating our policymakers instead of having people with deep pockets whispering in their ears, actually getting them to understand why it's important that we create accessibility for all and abundance.
Yeah, 100%. I think we could definitely be a beacon for other industries on how to do things right, or another example on how to do things wrong. I think we could easily go in either direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel very fortunate for passionate colleagues like you who are pushing it in the direction of it going well.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there, luckily, who have been able to make a lot of traction in a lot of these different areas: the equity, sustainability, small business growth, community uplift, that have really helped to break down barriers. Because trust me, if those people weren't in those legislative halls and they weren't, having some of those sleepless nights and organizing, things would look a lot different than they do now. I mean, even if there was legalization at all, which I don't think there would be without those real grassroots activists. So, there's a lot of people like that around the country, and I think it's important that they be celebrated and that we figure out ways to make sure that their work is alive and well in the thriving industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I noticed that you're working on something with Ben Cohen. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, sure. So I've known Ben for a couple of years, actually probably since 2015. We were first introduced in the industry and just kind of kept in touch since then. He recently started a cannabis company called Ben's Best, where he's come in with his advocacy hat that he typically has and wears proudly in business, and wants to figure out a way to build on that legacy by making sure that he's utilizing this cannabis industry in ways that repair some of the harms that have been done through the war on drugs, which cannabis was a major part of. So with Ben's Best, he is doing a low THC pre-roll, high quality, high terpenes, and utilizing suppliers that are diverse suppliers, as well as giving opportunities for other business hopefuls and business owners to carry this brand as it gets bigger, so that they can continue to differentiate. So I think what he's doing is excellent in that he's showing that the prosperity of the industry, right, can be utilized for good by having diverse suppliers and getting quality products out there that utilize these suppliers. But also, he has decided to give 100% of the profits to causes like my nonprofit, the New Leaf Project, which focuses on grants and low percent, low interest loans for Black and Brown owners in the cannabis industry, as well as the Last Prisoner Project and some other local initiatives in the states where it will operate. So essentially, it's just a really great example of how people can use amazing influence and power in business to create good economically and socially.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love what you're doing with the New Leaf Project because we need to have a lot more support for people starting their businesses or, like one of the things that I found was interesting and a little in the beginning, a little frustrating. Um, I got into cannabis because in my late 30s I had cancer, and before that I worked in nonprofit and specifically in civil rights. And when we started looking at legalization in California and we were talking about equity, the first thing that was coming out of people's mouths that weren't necessarily in the industry, some of them were, but was more about job opportunities. And that's very well and good. That's cool that they're creating job opportunities. But when I was thinking about equity, I was thinking, why not more of a seat at the table? Why are we not looking at helping people create their businesses? Or, like when we were talking about the traditional market, and I remember in a meeting I brought this up and people kind of looked at me like I was nuts. But I was like, hey, instead of busting people for cultivation, because what you're looking at are creative driven entrepreneurs, why don't we have a pamphlet that helps them like and create easy pathways to actually have a business that they don't have to be looking over their shoulder?
Yeah, yeah, you got it. You got it. Lowering the barriers of entry so that people can find their way into the regulated market. Yeah, extremely important. And I think that career opportunities are important, as you mentioned, but essentially, you got to create business owners in order to keep that going. You got to create business owners who are hiring from the communities that they're from. You got to create business owners that are providing opportunities for uplift in those same communities. I think you definitely missed the boat if you're only focused on career. And not only that, there's a lot of people, a lot of growers, a lot of people who have been in this traditional market that if they don't, if they can't get in themselves, they will continue to operate in the traditional or illicit market, and that's not going to be good for the industry. That's not going to be good for patients and consumers who want tested products. So it's in everyone's best interest to create easy pathways of entry for these entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. How have your grant cycles been going?
They've been well. So when it comes down to the day to day, I'm definitely not the. My wife Jeanette Ward Horton is the executive director, and I'm just on the board of the organization. But I can tell you at this point we will cross over the $1 million mark in grants and 0% actually interest loans that we've awarded in the industry so far. And that is through partnerships, not just with Ben's Best, but also with the city of Portland utilizing cannabis tax dollars, as well as other small businesses like LOWD, like my small business, donating, as well as very large businesses like Scott's Miracle Grow, being one of the largest donors. Again, all focused on figuring out ways that we can utilize the prosperity of the industry with tax dollars, as well as with the economic prosperity that most companies or some companies are experiencing.
That's awesome. That's really awesome because there's just so many. Well, have any other states or cities talk to both of you about replicating your model to be able to further the cause and be able to help people in other areas?
Yeah, there have been some discussions. I think we're such a small staff and spread very thin that we're doing our best to service the entrepreneurs that we have in Oregon. We have a really thriving small business community, lower barriers of entry for people like myself, people who don't come from financial means and maybe have had issues with the criminal justice system as a result of cannabis possession. A lot of those people have major opportunities in the state of Oregon. So we've been focused here, but definitely see opportunities to expand. We've done some loans in Colorado as well as in Texas through Ben's Best. We'll see what happens in other states. But I will say that it's a model that is continuing to develop as far as, how to be efficient in this work, how to be effective, how to track your work, how to do the reporting, show that, these dollars are going to the right sources and are being tracked in the right way and are being effective towards our goal. So I think that, we're learning from what other states and other cities are doing. And we believe that, that's happening on the other end. So I think no one's really figured it out. We're just happy to be a part of the group that's trying.
That's awesome. A few episodes ago, I had Angela White from Success Centers on, and Miss Angela, she had worked in a dispensary before she started doing the work with Success Centers. And I've just been really excited to see just all the different people who are stepping up to help lift everybody else up and to just create these opportunities, because it's crazy. I've been working in cannabis now for it's almost 10 years, and it's just been really interesting to see, like, in the medical times, how there were a lot of people who were thriving, and then as we started to get into legalization, how difficult it was to keep doing business. I mean, there were some good changes that happened, especially around like testing being required, but there were a lot of hardships that happened due to overregulation. And I really, when I go to other states, because I do a lot of lecturing on policy and education in states throughout the United States, especially states that are just starting out or they're about to, and I'm always amazed at how people are constantly reinventing the wheel instead of learning from others, successes or mistakes. And I'm wondering, like, what your thoughts are on stuff like that.
Yeah, it is interesting, as you see different regulations roll out, and how people, I was just in Vegas and I was learning how in Ohio, they've decided to do their sales increments in 10 and not in 8. And it's like, it's like every single other state, there's a method for how people are weighing cannabis. And this state has decided to, change it up completely. And everyone has their own idea on how things, should be regulated. And, I think everyone has their own perspective on whether or not certain policies work or whether they don't. And, it's interesting. But, I do understand, at least from a regulation standpoint, to a certain degree, because it's regulating a new industry. There's different voters and different legislators who have different interests, and it's definitely screwing things up in a lot of ways. And also it's hurting small businesses' opportunities to kind of remain competitive when you have these changing regulations. But I think with that, for small business owners like myself, or people who are really looking for ways to differentiate and find their ways in the market, a lot of these changes or nuances or market gaps that result from poorly thought out regulations a lot of times can open up business opportunities for those who are on top of it, and open up partnership opportunities and open up opportunities to revisit things and maybe figure out ways to include the community in some of these different decisions a little more than we have. So, I'm I'm definitely upset, but I'm more and more thankful for the opportunity to continue to find ways to get it right. I guess that's just kind of like my entrepreneur always try to find the glass, half full, even though, it may only be a quarter full as opposed to being half empty.
Well, that's definitely the mindset that you have to succeed, right? I'm surprised Ohio's doing tenths. That's so weird. I somebody gave me these pencils that say weed taught me the metric system.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Many of us.
It truly did. Such a weird thing, and I found that like state culture has a lot to do with how people decide to do their policies as well. Which, I guess you think about it a little bit when you like visit a state, but it's not until you really start to delve into their policy and get to know people who are creating it that you really see how strong that is. Like we are really like each of the states has their own culture. We're almost like we have a lot of similarities, but in some ways we're like our own little countries, and you don't really think about it because we all have. I mean, there are lots of different languages, of course, that are spoken in the United States, but and I say that as a first generation kid, but but underlying, we have the predominantly like English speaking nations. So you think, oh, we're all going to be we'll have some similarities. We're all, United States citizens. And then you go into these other states and you're like, wow, it's different. It's different. And maybe it was
Hmm.
like a little naivete for me because I'm from the Midwest. Like I grew up in northern Michigan and I've been living in California for going on 25 years. And that, even though there was there was definitely a difference. I think, Californians are so chill that it was just kind of like I just kind of slid into that culture and I was like, yeah, here I am. And then you like go to Arkansas and you're like, ooh, here I am. This is different.
Very different.
Yeah. And it's
Hmm.
cool, but it's also like really it's it's fascinating to see how that affects the way people look at the very same substance.
Yeah, certainly, 100%, without a doubt. And yeah, it's very interesting in this new age of legalization. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a fun place to be.
Yeah. So I was looking at your website and I saw that you have what you call slag flowers, smoke like a grower. Is that head stash?
Yeah, pretty much, pretty much. That's kind of the idea, and that as a grower, the best thing about being a grower, and a weed head, I would say, or a stoner, is that you spend so much time with these plants. You really get to know the plants. You get to know the strains. You get to know the branches. You're just in that room all the time. So when it finally goes and it starts drying, and the harvest is done, it's ready to start trimming. The growers go in and they really get the best pick of the buds that are in there. They can go in and select this beautiful mid-sized nug, very dense, no stem, got the perfect amount of light, and shade coverage. And then, grab it off of the branch and essentially trim it as delicately as they would like to, without touching the bud. Usually put it in a very great storage container. We've got really amazing UV resistant glass that's perfect for curing herbs. And they essentially have that perfect ounce, or that perfect half ounce out of that harvest. And that's what we're creating with these flag jars. And that me and my post production director will go in after every harvest, do exactly that, select the best buds, and we'll stick trim them so that we're only touching the stick and never touching the bud directly. Stick trim the buds directly into those jars, so that the people who then go and buy those, you have to have a password. You have to be one of our best customers. Can then smoke just like we do and be the first one to touch the flowers, before they get knocked around through packaging and handling and all those other things that we've kind of become accustomed to in the industry nowadays. So we think it's the truest essence of getting to those flowers, of smoking flower. And definitely it's the best part about being a grower. And people really it resonates with our community of connoisseur smokers.
Yeah. See, that's something that I miss. I also, well, I'm not behind the bar anymore, but when I was, we used to measure out, and it was really one of the things that I miss are just like big, beautiful buds that haven't been broken up too much. And I know, like, with the way we have to package everything, it's unavoidable. But when I saw that, I was like remembering, like, back in the day when, you know, growers would come in and it was the people who grew it were the people who were, bringing it into the dispensary. And when you'd become, get to know a grower, and it's like when you've been behind the bar for years, you have relationships with your growers, and every so often you get like a little bit of they'd gift you a little grower stash, and it'd just be like so precious. You'd be like, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Nowadays you'll get for a half ounce and you got, little what they call bee buds in there. You've got a little, you kind of smoking little small buds first because you want to save the best buds for later. And we just wanted to, give someone the chance to have that, perfect ounce with all the best buds.
Yeah, everyone should be able to experience it at least once to know what that's like, because it changes the way you look at cannabis.
That's right. That's right. I agree. I agree.
So with the cultivars that you pick out, how do you do that? And do you create some of your own genetics?
Yeah, we're very serious about genetics at Loud. It's one of the ways we really differentiate the company, and one of the ways that we connect with those connoisseur consumers who, really know the new genetics. They want to try the new genetics, and they want something that they can't necessarily just get from anywhere else. So we spend a lot of time hunting seeds and phenotype hunting, as they say, trying to find the best or our, perfect representation of a certain strain.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll bring those to market, right? It's kind of these loud hunted strains. But we also have a couple of strains that we bred ourselves, kind of pollen chucking, as they say. We're not breeders. We don't know a hell of a lot about it, but it doesn't take, a lot, right? It doesn't take rocket science. You get some pollen from a male that you really like, and you dust it on the female that you love, and hopefully you find something special. So we've done that a couple times with a couple of our genetics, and we also have just two actually right now, classics that have come down from the original breeders' cuts. So we kind of try to keep it in a mix. Primarily strains that we've hunted, some classic strains that have been gifted to us, and then some that we've bred ourselves.
That's very cool. And when we're talking about, the farming of cannabis, what are some of the values that are the most important to you in the practices that you found really help bring out the best in the flowers, and that maybe you've worked on to perfect? I know a lot of people are really interested in the process. I know I am.
Yeah, sure. So I think cannabis growing to me is mostly about discipline. It's about discipline and how you set up your facility and setting up your process. Not leaving any stone unturned, always trying to constantly be improving. But also, I think, so with that discipline and kind of focusing on these very small steps of this complete process, I think from a macro level, what I've learned more than anything to apply is just simplicity, and that you have to really just allow the plant to thrive, and not try to do too much to guide the direction of the plant. And I think that's something that is a little bit counterintuitive for most business people in general, especially I think growers and indoor growers who have all this equipment and all these things they're trying to dial in. A lot of times you have to set up lanes or kind of give certain paths, right, for that plant to move very freely. But at the same time, you've got to be very simple and not try to force it in any direction. Don't try to force yield. Don't try to force trichome coverage. Don't try to force taste or smell. You've got to let the genetics do what they do. So I think that's really the most important principle that I've learned, and I always go back to is, first being very process oriented and disciplined in your process, in your facility, in your setup, but then very, very simplistic in what you do to the plant to allow it to reach its peak of health.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your favorite cultivars?
That's tough.
I was gonna
I got a
say it
lot of
is.
cultivars, but I like ones we grow 503 Wi-Fi, so white fire OG pheno that we hunted that still is one of my favorite. 8 years from now, from when we first started growing it, I would say I love I really like gelato crosses and things that are going on right there as you move on into the runts and those types of things. I like those profiles. I'm really heavy on OGs. Definitely kind of like a connoisseur type of, never get tired of it, at least me, type of strain. I think those are some of my go-tos right now.
I've been noticing too that there is like, of course we always go through different trends with what genetics are popular. I know when I first started, that was when cookies were really exploding and things like cherry AK. But now we're starting to see like even some legacy genetics starting to pop back up, which has been really nice. And then some that are kind of just legendary. Like I picked up a hash the other day that was an OGKB cross, and I was like, whoa, I haven't seen this in a while. Have you been seeing any sort of what are you seeing as far as like trends with genetics? Are you seeing? I know there's always going to be new stuff, but have you been seeing like some of the legacy genetics popping up in Oregon too?
Not I haven't spent a lot of time at dispensaries, so I'm kind of head down.
I hear that.
Now and then, I would say I've seen less and less strain diversity as of lately. And I think because of that, you're starting to see people really delve or try to find those legacy strains and those and try to do different crosses. But I've definitely seen things move predominantly towards a number of different strains, the sherbs, the animal cookies, the cookies in general, the GMOs, purple punches, wedding cakes,
Oh
heavy
yeah.
Cushman. So I've seen a lot of that. I would love to see some of the older stuff, things that I think have kind of somewhat disappeared because of lack of THC percentage. Like a lot of the cheeses, the blueberries, some of those profiles that you just don't see quite as much anymore.
Yeah, I really miss those. I actually found, what was it? Not too long ago, somebody had given me some blueberry cookies, and I was like, wow, I haven't had this in a really long time. And then it made me think of like the DJ Short blueberry, which was just so good. And I started to think, huh, I wonder, who's still collecting these genetics? Because I used to collect a lot of seeds. And of course, you collect them and then I I misplaced them somewhere. And I was just like, ah, how many people have this story? you know? Or like what happens when somebody comes across that lost bag of seeds? And it's just an interesting thing to think about. Like I had a patient who used to come in all the time, and he had a space in Santa Cruz that he used to rent to somebody. And when he took the space back, he came in and he was like, "Yeah, I've got these old Colombian gold seeds." And he had a Panama Red, and he was like, "What should I do with them?" I was like, pop those beans, see what happens. If they were stored correctly, you shouldn't have a problem with them. And I always get really excited to see people, popping legacy seeds and seeing what they're like, because I still think about all those seeds I had and wonder what the heck happened to them, and creates a sadness. I was like, I had, it wasn't even stuff like that. It was more like blueberry yum yums and Cali Widow and things that we just don't see at all anymore. I really hope I hope there's a way that we can kind of preserve some of the genetics and preserve the legacy of it. Although we've also had issues with projects that have been trying to map the genetics, like the stuff that we saw with Phylos a few years back. And so I kind of wonder, like, how, as our industry starts to grow and we are dealing with proprietary stuff, but we're also dealing with the legacy issues, and just the fact that we've been Wild West for so long and people hold their genetics close to their chest, if we'll ever have an opportunity to fully like memorialize all the different genetics and things that we're doing without it being something that takes advantage of the cultivators and the geneticists that are working on these plants.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I think there's so many things that are lost at this point. And I hope, there's ways to kind of cross genetics to try to find those original traits of the mothers and the fathers. And, I think there's a lot to be said there and a lot of things to do. But, I talk to some of my grower friends all the time, and I've only been growing since 2012, so not even 10 years. When I was getting started, it was going for 20 years and more before that at a complex level with the way some of these growers were collecting genetics and crossing even then. So, I talked to them and I'm like, man, if you really knew what was going to happen, now, or what this would look like, or if you had the ability even to have a facility somewhere where you could just hold all the best genetics that you ran across, right? Back in the day in Oregon, you can get on Craigslist and find, some of the best genetics out there, go to somebody's house and pick them up for a cheap price and just collect them everywhere, and really great stuff when I was moving here. So, man, we all have lost many, many gold mines by, not even from a financial perspective and what you can sell it for, but just from a smoker's perspective and being able to experience all those strains and that diversity of strains that we had back then, would be amazing. And I think every time I mention it, every grower that I talk to says exactly the same thing. I agree 100%. If we would have known about tissue culture back then or had those capabilities, the industry would be different in a lot of ways, because a lot of us would have access. When you think about this big genetic pool that is cannabis, it's just amazing and infinite in so many different ways. So unfortunately, we've lost so many, but I think there's still a lot more to come as we learn more about these genetics.
Yeah. And when you're thinking about more to come, what are some of the things that you're excited about in the future?
I would say I'm excited. The thing that really excites most growers is, new seed pops and new genetics. And, there's always just these amazing profiles that are flavor profiles, smell profiles that are still yet to be found. We're finding them every day. So I get excited about that, definitely, just from a pure grower's perspective. And I think maybe from a business perspective, I think interstate commerce and what a lot of these small businesses are looking for in places like Oregon is a chance to compete in other states with some of these larger corporations. So I'm excited about that opportunity to compete. And I'm also excited about the myriad good things that we can do for so many different communities across the country, across the world, as this cannabis industry continues to be an economic powerhouse. And we just have so many different things that we can do to uplift these communities. People ask me all the time, like, why do I do all these different nonprofit things, or why do I focus on this or that when there's so much opportunity in the industry? And honestly, um, I understand their perspective, but I think what they don't understand is that I call it all the time low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's not a lot of work. Starting MCBA, yeah, it was a lot of work in a lot of ways, but, there's so many people who wanted to do the same work and so many amazing, easy, good things to do that you get so much traction and you get so much momentum just by small effort. And that's an amazing situation to be in when you got so much economic prosperity. So I'm excited about that as well.
Yeah. I was just thinking, because well, as a biracial woman myself, and I think about like the word minority, and I think, gosh, we're not really the minority anymore. So what happens, like, when we talk about like changing of language, like even the lexicon of like cannabis has changed, right? But how are we going to look at it, like when we're looking at just creating opportunity for people who have not been able to have opportunities, but we're not necessarily the minority anymore. I wonder like what our language is going to be like around that in the future. I mean, it's an interesting thing, and what are your thoughts on that? Because I just feel like the world has changed so much, especially like from when like I was a kid. Like I'm a child of the 70s. I was born in 73. And so like growing up biracial was an interesting thing, especially like in northern Michigan where almost everybody is white and speaks English. Well, it's changed now, but when I was growing up, that was it. And like coming to California was huge for me because I was like, wow, other brown people and other languages. And this is like super cool because I had just this very homogenous upbringing with a white mom and a Middle Eastern dad. And then as, being here and realizing that like we have like this language that we use where like talking about minorities and things like that, and then you start to realize that there are more of us than there are of like white folks. So
Right.
well, I wonder how that language is going to change. And I know this is kind of like going off topic in some ways, but what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think about it. I've thought about it a lot, especially as we were naming MCBA. I think, what I try to focus on, Sarah, is like kind of go back to the whole Shakespeare, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." And that, I was born in the '80s. I heard the time when, you're supposed to be African American, but what if you're not supposed to be African American? You're black. And then before it was Negro, and then now people think Negro is okay. And before you said it was colored people, but now people say people of color. So it's like I just don't, I try not to focus on that. And I think that, as we were looking at Minority Cannabis Business Association, I think, it's I don't see it as lesser. I think people hear the
Yeah.
word minority. I think by the definition, I mean, it's lesser in number. And I think if you look at our individual groups compared to white people, I think it's still symbolic in that we have less opportunities from a numbers perspective. I think that I think it still is relevant. Just simply from that simple idea that there are less black people, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you call it minority or not, I don't look at it as lesser. Just lesser in number to me has never meant less significant or worse. My fraternity, a common saying is eight. Eight among 80. Eight out of 80. Right? I'd rather have 8 men thoroughly immersed than 80 with lukewarm enthusiasm. So I don't know. I definitely don't look at it like that, but I understand how people do. It's just that I feel like once we start to focus on those conversations, then it begins to have less significance. For example, for a long time in cannabis industry, I was heard that we shouldn't say black market, right? It became one time we had a conversation for 30 minutes in a meeting about how black market and you shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that because it's racist. I mean, and then when you look at it, the black market is used in so many different terms, like Rolexes and watches, like the black market. It's not because black people are selling Rolexes, you know, on the illegal market. When you look at that term, it came out of China. So it's not really a racist term, but it's easy to see how people connected to that. And now we're talking about all these other things as opposed to talking about the real issues like license limits and these things, right? So, you know, I understand it, but I think that to a certain degree, it detracts from a lot of things that we're trying to get accomplished because 5 years from now, there'll be another conversation. As I mentioned, you know, the idea of calling people colored people was racist. But now if you don't say people of color, then you're racist. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. It is. There's a lot to navigate. And then there's also, you know, now we're starting to turn that bend where people are saying, well, do we want to say people of color? And it's like, okay.
I didn't know we were, yeah, so I didn't know that it covered that. Here we go. I always felt that and that's what we were looking at MCBA. People were like, no, it shouldn't be minorities, people of color. And I'm like, so does that mean white people don't have color? I mean, what are we talking about here? You know what I mean? Of course, white people are a color.
Yeah.
So now we're back to colored, the idea of colored people. And that, to me, made me feel uncomfortable. So it makes sense that, you know, maybe some people are uncomfortable with that. But, oh, man, I've just seen so many different things change back and forth and a lot of things not get done. And the real issues not get solved. So I just try to let other people define that and work with what I know at the time. And then, you know, if we change it later, then I'll do that as well.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. And it kind of made me chuckle when you're like, no, white people have color. Because my mom has this drawing that I did as a kid in her living room. I think I was like in first or second grade, and she went to parent-teacher conferences, and my teacher was like, you really have to see this, Barbara. And I explained it as, I was like, you know, this is, you know, my mom. Actually, I was like, this is my dad. He's really dark. And it was like, the crayon was to the point where it was just like shiny, shiny brown crayon. And then it was like, here's me. I'm tan. And then my brother is lighter than me. So I put my brother as, you know, what was called flesh colored at the time. And then my mom, because she's Scandinavian, she was just an outline.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. So, yeah, she not have any.
And it was like, you know, through the eyes of a child, it's like, yeah, well, you know, whatever. We all have our thing. And
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I love that. And my mom still has that in the living room. And it's like, she told me about it years later because I totally forgot about it. And I was like, huh, all right, yeah, that's about it. But poor mom, we would always tease her. We'd be like, oh, Mom, you're like a ghost.
Poor mom. That's funny.
Well, it's been so wonderful talking with you, Jesse. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today. And for our listeners, if they want to follow you on social media or your websites, what's the best way to do that?
Thank you, Sarah. You can find me at Jesce Horton, Jesse Horton on Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. New Leaf Project, NULEAF project.org, and at New Leaf Project on Instagram. And you can find the company LOWD, www.lowd.com, and at TheLOWD on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for keeping your eye on the prize around, you know, social justice, equity, getting people to be able to have opportunities to work in this field if they want to, and actually own a piece of the pie, because it's so incredibly important. And just, I'm really looking forward to the next time I get up to Portland, checking out your flowers, because they just look beautiful. And my jaded ass doesn't get excited about much, but I really like what you're doing. I really, really appreciate it. And for those of you out there who want to follow Planted on social media, remember that we are 2 times a month now. You can listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there's a lot of other great podcasts as well. You can listen to us on Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, Apple, Google, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, we are there. We are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook, on IG. We are Planted with Sara on Twitter, and www.plantedwithsara.com for our website. Stay tuned. We will be in 2 weeks having another wonderful episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, we are not out of the woods yet with this pandemic, so stay safe. It's a crazy world out there. Be good to one another, and until next time, stay curious. Thanks, everyone. Take care.